You're sitting at Donald's kitchen table in 1954, watching him explain to his mother why his lemonade costs 8 times more than everyone else's, and why kids are literally saving their allowance money to afford it. What you're about to witness is the birth of premium pricing psychology that luxury brands spend millions trying to understand. Here's the mind-blowing revelation that changed everything. Donald discovered that price doesn't just reflect value, it creates value in people's minds. While every other kid was trapped in a race to the bottom, frantically cutting prices to compete, Donald did something that seemed completely insane. He raised his prices to $2 per cup when the market rate was 25 cents. But here's what's absolutely fascinating: sales didn't drop. They increased. Kids started bringing friends just to show off that they could afford the expensive lemonade. Parents began buying it as treats for good behavior. The neighborhood started treating Donald's stand like a luxury destination instead of just another drink option. The psychological warfare was brilliant. Donald had accidentally discovered what behavioral economists now call price-quality inference, the phenomenon where people assume expensive things are automatically better. He started using real glass cups instead of paper ones, added fresh mint leaves, and created elaborate flavor profiles with names like the Executive and the Prestige. The actual lemonade recipe barely changed, but the perception was completely transformed. This is exactly what Starbucks does when they charge $7 for a coffee that costs 30 cents to make. It's what Whole Foods does when they position themselves as whole paycheck. It's what Tesla did when they made electric cars a status symbol instead of an environmental compromise. But Donald figured this out before business schools even taught consumer psychology. Meanwhile, his former competitors were watching their customer base literally walk past their cheaper stands to pay premium prices at Donald's. They couldn't understand what was happening because they were still thinking like commodity sellers. They thought customers wanted the best deal, but Donald understood something deeper. Customers wanted to feel sophisticated about their choices. The tactical breakthrough was pure genius. He started offering premium memberships with different tiers: bronze, silver, and gold. Gold members got special perks like advance reservations, exclusive flavors, and their names written in a VIP book that other kids could see. He had created a loyalty program that made customers feel important while generating predictable revenue. But here's where it gets really sophisticated. Donald realized that the psychology worked both ways. Not only did high prices make customers value the product more, they also made him feel more confident as a seller. When you're charging premium prices, you naturally start acting more professionally, delivering better service, and believing in your own value proposition. The ripple effects were incredible. Other neighborhood businesses started asking this 9-year-old for advice. The local ice cream truck driver wanted to know how Donald got kids to pay so much for drinks. Parents started using his stand as a teaching moment about entrepreneurship and value creation. But what happened next was the masterstroke that turned this from a neighborhood curiosity into a legitimate business empire. You're watching from across the street as 8-year-old Donald approaches Jimmy Peterson's lemonade stand with a briefcase, an actual briefcase his father let him borrow. What's about to happen will give you chills because it's the exact same strategy Amazon used to crush independent bookstores and Uber used to eliminate taxi companies. Here's the devastating move that changed everything. Instead of trying to outcompete his rivals, Donald decided to buy them out entirely. But here's what's absolutely brilliant. He didn't use his own money. He convinced his father to invest in his lemonade empire by positioning it as a real estate play. "Dad, if I control all the prime corner locations, I control the whole neighborhood market," he explained. Fred Trump was so impressed by his son's thinking that he fronted him the capital. The holy shit moment came when Donald realized something that wouldn't become mainstream business strategy for another 30 years. Market consolidation creates pricing power. While other kids were stuck competing on margins, Donald was systematically eliminating competition by making offers that were impossible to refuse. Here's exactly what happened. Donald would approach a struggling lemonade stand owner and offer to buy their entire operation for more money than they'd made all summer. To an 8-year-old who'd been sitting in the hot sun for weeks earning pennies, getting $5 upfront felt like winning the lottery. But Donald wasn't just buying their stands, he was buying their customer lists, their prime locations, and most importantly, their silence. The deal included a non-compete clause where the kid agreed not to start another lemonade stand for the rest of the summer. This is exactly what Facebook does today when they acquire potential competitors like Instagram and WhatsApp before they become threats. It's what Disney does when they buy Marvel, Pixar, and Lucasfilm to control entire entertainment universes. But Donald figured this out in elementary school. The psychological insight was ruthless. He understood that most kids weren't really entrepreneurs, they were just trying to make some pocket money. By offering them a guaranteed payout instead of the uncertainty of daily sales, he was solving their real problem while eliminating his competition. It was a win-win that created a monopoly. Meanwhile, parents around the neighborhood started calling him the little businessman because they'd never seen anything like it. While their kids were learning basic arithmetic, Donald was conducting merger and acquisition deals. He had a notebook where he tracked his territory expansion, marked competitor locations, and calculated market share. The tactical genius was in the execution. He didn't just buy out random stands, he strategically targeted the ones in prime locations first. Corner houses near the community pool by the park entrance. He understood something that real estate moguls spend decades learning. Location isn't just important, it's everything. But what happened next was even more brilliant because Donald realized that owning the supply wasn't enough. He needed to control demand itself, and that meant fundamentally changing how people thought about lemonade. You're standing in young Donald's backyard in the summer of 1953, watching him pace back and forth like a miniature CEO planning a hostile takeover. His father Fred had just finished explaining basic supply and demand over breakfast, and something clicked in this kid's brain that would reshape how he thought about business forever. Here's the holy shit moment that nobody talks about. While every other kid on the block was setting up identical card tables with hand-drawn signs, Donald spent 3 days studying the neighborhood. He counted how many stands there were, timed when kids got thirstiest, and here's the kicker. He noticed something that even adult business owners miss. The kids with the longest lines weren't necessarily selling the best lemonade. They were the ones who made people feel special for waiting. So Donald made a decision that seemed completely insane. Instead of trying to serve more customers faster, he deliberately created bottlenecks. He got his hands on actual velvet rope from his father's construction office, set up a VIP section with only 4 chairs, and instituted a membership system. Kids had to apply to become Lemonade Club members by writing their name on a piece of paper and explaining why they deserved access. The psychological warfare was brilliant. While Tommy's stand down the street was practically begging kids to buy his 5-cent lemonade, Donald's stand had children literally competing for the privilege to pay 25 cents 5 times more. But here's what's absolutely fascinating. The kids who got accepted into his club didn't just buy lemonade. They became walking advertisements, bragging to their friends about being members and making other kids desperate to get in. This is exactly what Supreme does today when they create artificial scarcity around a $30 white t-shirt and sell it for $300. It's what Rolex does when they make you wait 2 years for a Submariner. It's what exclusive restaurants do when they claim to be fully booked even when they have empty tables. Donald had accidentally discovered that exclusivity creates value, and he was doing it at age 7. Meanwhile, his competitors were stuck in what economists call a commodity trap. They thought the only way to win was to offer more lemonade for less money. They were focused on the product, while Donald was focused on the experience. He understood something that most business owners never figure out. People don't just buy what you're selling. They buy how it makes them feel. The tactical breakthrough was pure genius. Instead of competing in the existing market, he created an entirely new category. He wasn't selling lemonade anymore. He was selling status, exclusivity, and the feeling of being chosen. The velvet rope wasn't just a barrier. It was a psychological trigger that made everything behind it seem more valuable. But what happened next was even more ruthless, because Donald realized that controlling access was just the beginning. If he really wanted to dominate, he needed to control the entire supply chain. Hey, everyone. Today we're diving into how a 7-year-old kid in Queens accidentally invented the blueprint that every luxury brand uses today. And it all started with a lemonade stand that had actual velvet ropes. Picture this. It's 1953, and you're walking down a tree-lined street in Jamaica Estates, Queens. The summer heat is brutal. Kids are running around with makeshift stands on every corner, and then you see something that stops you dead in your tracks. There's a lemonade stand, but this one's different. There's a literal red velvet rope blocking access, a hand-painted sign that says, "Members Only," and a kid in a miniature suit jacket who looks like he's running a nightclub instead of selling drinks to thirsty neighbors. That kid was Donald Trump, and what he did next would accidentally create the psychological foundation that companies like Tesla, Apple, and Rolex use to this day to make billions. While every other kid was desperately trying to undercut each other selling lemonade for a nickel, then 3 cents, then practically giving it away, Donald was doing something completely counterintuitive. He was making his lemonade harder to get. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. This wasn't just childhood creativity. This 7-year-old had stumbled onto one of the most powerful psychological principles in business: artificial scarcity combined with social proof. Tesla does this exact same thing today when they create waiting lists for their cars. Apple does it when they limit product releases. Supreme does it with their drops. But a second grader figured it out first, completely by accident. If this kind of business detective work fascinates you, smash that like button and subscribe for more shocking business stories. Drop a comment with what modern company reminds you most of this story, because the parallels are everywhere once you start looking. The genius wasn't in the lemonade recipe. It was in understanding something that most adults never figure out. People want what they can't have more than what they can. While his competitors were stuck in a race to the bottom, frantically trying to offer the cheapest option, Donald had created something entirely different. He'd turned a commodity into a luxury experience. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where most people get the story completely wrong. This wasn't just about exclusivity for exclusivity's sake. There was a methodical business strategy happening behind those velvet ropes, and it was more sophisticated than what most Fortune 500 companies were doing at the time. Now, let me take you back to witness how this incredible story unfolded. Because what happened next changed everything, not just for one kid's summer business, but for how we understand consumer psychology itself. You're standing in Donald's bedroom in the summer of 1955, staring at a wall covered in hand-drawn maps, profit charts, and what looks like a military operation planning board. At age 10, this kid has just figured out something that stumps most MBA graduates: how to scale a business without working harder. Here's the holy shit moment that nobody saw coming. Donald realized he didn't need to run lemonade stands. He needed to own the system that runs lemonade stands. While other kids were still stuck thinking about selling drinks, Donald had evolved into something completely different. He had become a franchiser. The breakthrough came when his younger neighbor, Bobby Martinez, approached him begging to learn the secret of making so much money from lemonade. Instead of seeing Bobby as competition, Donald saw him as an opportunity. "I'll teach you everything I know," Donald told him. "But you pay me 30% of everything you make, and you follow my exact system." This was the birth of the Trump method, a franchise model that he'd later use in real estate, hotels, and eventually reality TV. But he invented it at age 10, selling lemonade. The psychological insight was devastating. He understood that people would pay for proven systems, ongoing support, and the right to use a successful brand. Within 6 weeks, Donald had 12 kids operating Trump lemonade stands across 3 neighborhoods. He wasn't just taking a percentage, he was providing the cups, teaching the sales techniques, setting the prices, and most importantly, maintaining quality control. If a franchisee wasn't meeting standards, their license got revoked. He had created a legitimate business empire with standardized operations, brand consistency, and scalable revenue. The tactical genius was in the support system. Donald didn't just take money and disappear. He created what modern businesses call ongoing value. He held weekly training sessions in his garage, taught advanced sales psychology, and even negotiated bulk purchasing deals for supplies. His franchisees weren't just paying for permission. They were paying for education and infrastructure. Meanwhile, adults in the neighborhood started taking notice. Fred Trump was so impressed that he began incorporating some of Donald's customer service innovations into his own construction business. The local bank manager asked Donald to speak at a community event about youth entrepreneurship. A 10-year-old was teaching grown-ups about business strategy. But here's what's absolutely fascinating about the psychology. Donald had discovered that teaching others made him smarter. Every question from a franchisee forced him to systematize his thinking, document his processes, and refine his methods. He wasn't just building a business empire, he was building his own expertise by explaining it to others. The expansion accelerated rapidly. By the end of that summer, Trump lemonade stands were generating more revenue than most adult-owned businesses in the neighborhood. Donald was earning money from 12 different locations while spending most of his time on strategy, quality control, and new market development. The consequences were immediate and far-reaching. Other neighborhood kids started trying to copy the franchise model, but they missed the crucial elements: systematic training, quality standards, and ongoing support. They thought franchising meant let other people do the work. But Donald understood it meant help other people succeed while building your own empire. You're fast-forwarding through decades, watching as every major business innovation Donald would later become famous for traces back to those childhood summers in Queens. The velvet ropes became exclusive Mar-a-Lago memberships. The premium pricing psychology became luxury hotel suites. The franchise model became Trump-branded properties worldwide. But the most shocking part, he never really changed the fundamental playbook. The long-term impact on business practices has been staggering. What started as a 7-year-old's lemonade experiment became the template for modern luxury brand building. Companies across every industry now use artificial scarcity, premium positioning, and franchise expansion, but few understand that these weren't academic theories. They were battlefield-tested strategies developed by a kid who just wanted to sell more lemonade than his neighbors. The regulatory and industry changes that resulted from this thinking revolutionized how we understand consumer psychology. Business schools now teach courses on experiential marketing and brand exclusivity that directly trace back to principles Donald discovered accidentally. The idea that customers will pay more for the feeling of exclusivity than for superior products has become foundational to industries from fashion to technology to hospitality. But here's where pattern recognition gets really interesting and slightly terrifying. Look at how modern tech companies operate, and you'll see the same DNA everywhere. Netflix creates artificial scarcity with limited time releases. Tesla builds waiting lists that make cars more desirable. Apple launches products in waves that create exclusive early access. Amazon uses Prime memberships to create tiered customer experiences. These aren't coincidences, they're variations on the same psychological framework. A 10-year-old developed selling drinks in Queens. The franchise psychology has become the backbone of the modern gig economy. Uber drivers, Airbnb hosts, and Amazon delivery partners are all essentially franchisees. They pay for access to a proven system, follow standardized procedures, and give the parent company a percentage of their earnings. Donald figured out this model 70 years before Silicon Valley disrupted traditional employment. What's absolutely fascinating is how the premium pricing breakthrough predicted our entire luxury economy. We now live in a world where people pay $200 for sneakers that cost $20 to make, $8 for coffee that costs 50 cents to produce, and $1,000 for phones that become obsolete in 2 years. Donald discovered that price creates perceived value, and entire industries have been built on that insight. The 3 game-changing lessons are: first, artificial scarcity creates real value. People want what they can't easily have. Second, premium pricing doesn't just increase profits, it increases perceived quality and customer satisfaction. Third, scaling means creating systems that work without you, not just working harder yourself. Here's how today's entrepreneurs can apply this. Stop competing on price and start competing on experience. Create exclusive access tiers that make customers feel special for choosing you. Build franchise-like systems where others can succeed using your methods while generating revenue for you. Most importantly, understand that people don't just buy products, they buy the story they tell themselves about why they deserve premium experiences. Whether you're selling software, consulting services, or actual lemonade, the psychology remains the same. Make people feel chosen, charge them appropriately for that feeling, and systematize your success so others can pay to replicate it. Which brings up the fascinating question: in an AI-driven economy where everything can be commoditized instantly, what new forms of artificial scarcity and premium positioning will emerge?